Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's Friday Reflections on this, the 23rd of July, 2021. Jummah Mubarak, which means Blessed Friday. Today, I would like to read from this book, which is one of Mawlana Shaykh Nazim's books from 1986, called Mercy Oceans, Rising Sun. And these are the written down sohbets or talks of Mawlana Shaykh Nazim. And I'm going to read the first sohbet in the book, The Station of Unity. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. O my Lord, I ask you to grant me understanding and to enable me, O my Lord, to make others understand. A prayer of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Every time I address people, I silently make this supplication, as I know that only he who himself understands can teach people anything useful. A visitor recently told me about a spiritual teacher whose lectures and writings were so difficult that only trained intellectuals could make sense of what he was saying. It is not a sign of a man's understanding that his teachings be incomprehensible. A man of understanding will always try to make himself well understood by using clear and straightforward speech, adjusting to the level of his audience. And he will try to address as broad an audience as possible. Otherwise, his words will be scattered with the winds. Even Allah Almighty, the Lord of all creatures, the Master of existence, in all his glory and greatness, condescends to the level of his creatures. This is called Tanazzulat Subhani, or as close as it can be translated, the condescension of glory, or the condescension of the glorious one. You may find him almighty with his creatures on every level. If he were not with an ant and knew not the conditions in which that ant lives and what are its needs, he could not, by definition, be the Lord of that ant. He, the Lord of all, in his knowledge, is even with microscopic creatures. So what about mankind, the most distinguished of his creatures? Is it saying too much to say that he is with us? Does the Creator not know what he created? Asks the Lord that we may understand that does the Creator not know what he created? Asks the Lord, this is something God asks, that we may understand his omniscience, that being the Lord of all creation does not detract from his being with each individual creature. So, a few points so far. Mawlana is highlighting that we should speak clearly, that a good teacher who understands what they're saying is able to break that down into words which are easy to understand. That the teacher who speaks in very complicated language all the time, even when they're with an audience that can't understand that level of language, is not showing that they can understand what they're talking about. If they really understood, they would be able to break it down to a level at which their audience could understand. And Mawlana continues and says that if Allah didn't know if Allah didn't know about an ant and what conditions the ant was living in, then how could Allah be the Lord of the ant? And so it is the same with us human beings, because, if Allah doesn't understand his creation, then how can Allah be the Lord of creation? It's within Allah's nature, and Allah actually asks this question rhetorically, that we may understand that, of course, Allah does understand. And that Allah's being everywhere, his omniscience, and it doesn't distract from the fact that Allah is also with us on a personal level as well. Because, Allah is not limited like us. We can't be, in lots of places at once and only in one place at the same time. But Allah can be, because Allah is not limited. We are limited creatures. So we shouldn't put our limitations on our Lord and think that our Lord is limited in the same way as his creatures. I mean, you imagine two ants talking about human beings. And when one of them says, I saw them get into a machine, and that machine traveled very fast on these round things that went around and around. And the other ant's saying, no, that's not possible. We can't make that kind of vehicle. Just because the ant can't doesn't mean that people can't. Now, obviously, there's a big difference between the abilities of a human being and Allah. Allah is not limited at all. But we're not limited in the same way as the ant. So perhaps by comparing, we may be able to understand this principle, although it's obviously different in degree. Bismillah. The holy prophets and their inheritors in every age have been endowed with knowledge of divine realities, which is hidden from the rest of humanity. And it is their main duty to make these realities comprehensible to mankind in general and to individual people in whatever way possible, in accordance with the respective levels and capabilities of those people. As the teachers of humanity, they have been granted the ability to communicate in this manner, to speak directly to people's hearts. This they have been granted from the attributes of their Lord. But only the prophets and their true inheritors may find such flexibility available to them. For others, it is difficult to address everyone, other than those who share with them a similar background, a manner of perception. But divine teachers may be to every people what they need, may say what they need to hear. That is why people of varying backgrounds and ranks in life may all find peace with the same man and follow him, or with the same person. A Concorde could never land on the roof of this building, but a helicopter could. Most scholars are like Concordes, so proud of their immense wingspans, streamlined form, and speed. Only a few statesmen and tycoons, men and women of distinction and endowed with great wealth, may enter and ride Concordes. So scholars may speak and write for the appreciation of other scholars. Concordes fly at tremendous speeds and require huge runways at international airports to land. But a helicopter can land anywhere, even sometimes at sea, and it can always hover in mid-air while lowering a lifeline to people trapped by a fire. So divine teachers are accessible to everyone in every situation, whereas Concordes might crash in a place where only helicopters can reach to rescue the survivors. Therefore, I am not leaving them on the tops of the Himalaya mountains, but bringing them to safety. So the prophets, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon them all, were granted special revelations and insights and knowledge. which it was then their responsibility, their duty to teach to other people. And they had a gifted communication that they were able to pass on this knowledge to all different people, from kings and statesmen to business people, to people who were the scientists of their times, to ordinary people. And they were able to do this and communicate on all these different levels. But not everybody has the same ability to do that. Mawlana makes a reference here to Concorde. Concorde was a British and French plane that was developed. It was flying during the 1980s. I think it was developed during the late 70s. And it was flying during the 1980s. It was a supersonic plane that you could buy tickets on, but it was very expensive. So I suppose today it would actually be more comparable to something like Virgin Galactic, which goes into space, which didn't exist then. But I mean, these kind of transports are out of reach of most people. And Mawlana is comparing, a lot of scholars are like those kind of vehicles. They are very expensive. And yes, they are amazing vehicles, but they're very expensive. And, they're difficult to land. You can't fly them everywhere and land them everywhere. But a helicopter, you can fly it anywhere and land it anywhere, on the roof of a building, in a car park, at sea, anywhere. You don't need a runway, you don't need much at all. A helicopter can go all sorts of places and rescue people, even in very dangerous locations. Even you can fly a helicopter in the mountains and land it on the side of a mountain. I mean, you can't do that with, airplanes or with these new spacecraft. So, Mawlana is saying that a scholar should be more like a helicopter. So the scholar should be able to go anywhere and be able to communicate with people anywhere, and not need special platforms, not need to use such a language that no one can understand except people who've been to university and got doctorates. If they are using that kind of language, they're not really teaching anybody anything. The people they're already speaking to are already on that level of knowledge in some way. Whereas the people who need that knowledge the most, they can't benefit from it because it is too complicated for them. And Mawlana is cautioning against this and saying this is not the way at all, that it needs to be broken down and explained simply. Seekers of truth must look for those qualities in a teacher who purports to be addressing subjects related to the divine. Otherwise, they will be pursuing useless studies. And according to the Holy Prophet, Salam, a sign of a person's perfection in Islam is his abandonment of useless activities, that which doesn't concern him. So, there's a lot of these things which scholars may be teaching, which are not actually for everybody. And maybe there are particular people within society who need to have that knowledge, but unless you're in those particular professions, you don't need to be delving too much into those forms, those parts of knowledge. So it's like we have to be teaching what is relevant for the student and what is going to help them in their day-to-day life. Talking about some very fine particular aspect of the scholarship of the study, maybe even the hadith even, I mean, everybody today is quoting hadith. Hadith study used to be a specialist science. It was only pursued by those people who would become, very important scholars within their society, who would, be deciding on laws that would be affecting the ordinary people, who may become judges or, jurists of some kind. It was not for Joe who works down the butcher's, or the person who works in the local supermarket. who is just doing a normal job, doing their work, looking after their family. They may want to read something like, a book of 40 hadith, which has been made simple for them, some pointers that they can easily absorb. But they don't need to know a doctorate in hadith studies. If they spent their time doing that, they wouldn't be focusing on being a good butcher or, being a good nurse or a doctor at a hospital or whatever else that they're doing. Because, in order to do that, you literally need to study it at the same sort of level that you would study law at university in order to really understand. And I know myself from, studying Islam for the past over 21 years, that these are specialist areas of knowledge. And unless you really put a lot of study into them, you won't really understand them anyway. So we need to, a good teacher needs to give advice to their students, which applies to the different students in whatever fields of work, in whatever lifestyle which they have within society, at all different levels. And if someone is a specialist in another area, then how are they going to be a specialist in the science of hadith? How are they going to be? Maybe you get one person here or one person there, but it's such a huge field of study, and that's just the science of hadith. There are so many specialist fields that you can study within Islam alone. Never mind other studies which people might want to research. And if you end up studying to that level, and it's going to take you years, maybe a decade or more to really master it of any useful level, and you're researching that particular area, but you actually want to be an inventor or a scientist or a doctor of medicine or, a lawyer in the normal courts. If you spend 10 years of study becoming a doctor of hadith, it's not going to help you. And you might end up not being able to master the career that you want to go into. So, people are giving the wrong advice here. And Islam is actually quite simple, as in what we need to practice to be a good Muslim that has hope for the hereafter. It's actually simple. It's not difficult. Yes, if you want to be a jurist, that's different. If you want to be a qadi, you want to be a judge within, the Sharia system, that requires a lot of study. But if you just want to be a Muslim who is a good practicing Muslim and go into another career, which of course, a society requires people in all different careers. You can't just have scholars and jurists. You need people in all different careers in order to make a society work. And you're going into one of these other careers, then you need to focus on that and need to understand what you need to understand from Islam to be able to practice it and be at ease, that you know that you're doing the right things and you have a hope for Jannatul Firdaus when you leave this life. But you don't need to become, a scholar of fiqh or of hadith or something like that in order to do that. Those who have a passion for it and an aptitude for it, by all means, I'm not trying to discourage them. But neither was Mawlana, but it's highlighting that there's a lot of things that for most people would be useless studies. Not because there's no benefit in those studies, but for those people, there's no benefit in them. There's this famous hadith which is where we get the 5 pillars concept from, where a man asked the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and says that he's not educated. That I think he said he was a goat farmer or something. So he was a Bedouin, just looked after a few animals, looked after his family. He was not a scholar. He didn't have the aptitude for this, but he wanted to be a Muslim. He wanted to be right by Allah and by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. And so he asked for advice. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu said, to believe in Allah, the oneness of Allah, Shahada, Salah, your prayers, Salam, fasting, Zakat, which is your obligatory charity, your almsgiving, and Hajj, if you can do it. Just 5 principles. It's our belief any Muslim who fulfills these 5 principles and doesn't do anything, majorly serious in a bad way, and they have good intention in their heart, that there's nothing for them to worry about with Allah. Islam is that simple. But of course, for Imam Ali, may Allah bless his soul, who became the 4th Caliph of Islam and a great scholar, which, was a teacher of so many other scholars and other people for generations, then obviously the situation was a bit different for Imam Ali, but that's because he was carrying different responsibility to these Bedouin. Just like today, if someone become a politician or somebody runs a business or somebody is a professor or master within their particular profession, then they have a lot more to carry than the average person. Doesn't mean that in the end of it all, that they are going to, that they're any better. They're still a human being. But at the same time, they have a lot more responsibility to carry. And with the responsibility, they're going to need more training. And this is what some of these fields within Islam are for. But they're not for just everybody. And if it's not your area, then it is knowledge which is that which doesn't concern you. And if it's taking you away from your responsibilities and what you are good at, which you should be focusing on, then you should be focusing on that, as long as it is halal and beneficial to society. Anyway, I digress. Mawlana continues. Our guest mentioned that this scholar was addressing the topics of fana and baka, or annihilation and permanence in the divine. I think that no one, except those who have arrived at these stations, is qualified to speak of them. Otherwise, his description will be like that of a person who has never tasted honey, trying to describe its taste from what he has read about it to others who have been deprived of honey. Or it will be like asking a little boy about the pleasures of a honeymoon. It would be useless. These topics are oceans. When you melt, dissolving in the unity ocean of Allah Almighty, then you may understand the meaning of fani fillah, annihilation in Allah. When you abandon your position as a being in existence, when you become as a drop of rain falling from the sky and are immersed, united in that ocean of divine unity, then no one can ask where that drop has gone. The drop became an ocean. As long as the drop is falling, it continues to say, I am something. But when it reaches that ocean, it looks and says, where am I? I am finished. I am with him. I am here, but not here. Only he is here, but I am now with him. I am in his ocean. I feel this. But no more can it be said that I am a drop. This drop has become an ocean. That is only a very small description of annihilation in God. Baqa, or permanence, is to be with him always. In such a station, your personality does not appear. What appears is only divine existence. You have been dressed in divine unity. That is the station of unity. Maqam al-Tawheed. What Baka means is that you will never lose sight, hearing, feeling, knowing, understanding, never, but they will be without limits. We must try to attain these stations, but the way is difficult and requires severe training. One of the aspects of that training is to try and see everything as proceeding from him alone. This is the sixth pillar of faith in Islam. The belief that everything that happens in this world, the good and the bad alike, are from God. This referred to as Tawheed al-Afal, or the unity of actions. The way to begin to realize this point is to remember the source of all events, Allah Almighty. When events occur, and not to occupy oneself with blaming or lauding those who are not really the causes of events, only the instruments to their existence, to their occurrence, This means that if Ahmed comes and gives you a £1 coin, and then Fulan comes and slaps you and takes it away, you don't think of Ahmed as the giver of money, nor of Fulan as a thief. If you think like this, you have fallen from that high level of faith. You must perceive the hand of Allah behind both hands, that which giveth and that which taketh away, as He is the creator of the actions of people. When someone is generous or kind to you, you must remember that it was your Lord who sent him with that favor, and you must thank your Lord. But at the same time, you are going to say thank you to that person, as without giving thanks to the carrier of that blessing, your thanks to its origin is not going to be complete. If you haven't thanked the person, you haven't thanked Allah. This is from a hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. Our Prophet, upon whom be peace, is advising us strongly that we should not allow our vision of unity to distract us from perfecting our politeness with our fellow men. But you know that it is your Lord who sent him, and you are not forgetting that under any circumstances, and when you see that Ahmed has filled your hands with gold, you must say to him, O Shaykh Ahmed, thank you so much. And firstly, thanks to your Lord, who sent you with favors from me, and thank you for faithfully delivering what was entrusted to you. And when that robber, Fulan, comes, hits you and takes all the money, don't be angry with him. Yes, the divine law, the Sharia, permits you to retrieve that money if you can, and prescribes a punishment to be meted out by society as well. But if you are on the way of unity, then you must regard that action as coming to you from Allah Almighty too. He alone sent that man to rob you, because the creator of every action is only one, Allah Almighty. Because it is not possible for all people to aspire to this high level of faith, in which God's hand is seen behind every event, Allah Almighty, in one verse of the Holy Quran, condones a life for a life in the case of murder, and goes on to call those who are capable of it to turning the other cheek. These are the levels, respectively, of Sharia, the law, and Tariqah, the path. Based on this verse, therefore, the Islamic law concerning murder is balanced, making concession for the normal human feelings of vengeance in the face of such an abominable crime. Islam allows for the execution of the duly convicted murderer, and in this way assuages the feelings of the close relatives, thus preventing extended blood feuds. The law also allows for the payment of blood money in lieu of execution, to be paid by the victim's close relatives. Lastly, the verse calls for those who are seeking the highest level of faith and unity to forgiveness, saying, and whoso forgives and promotes understanding, his reward is incumbent on his Lord. So you see that the highest level of faith within Islam is understanding that whatever happens to you, it comes to you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whether it is a good thing or a bad thing, or what you perceive as a good thing or a bad thing, that ultimately it was Allah behind it. And Allah is giving and taking away. Allah is testing us. And this is difficult because this is not how we are accustomed to think as ego-driven individuals, which is the normal level of human beings, unless we transcend it. On the normal level, we see everybody as individuals and everybody consciously doing whatever they're doing, whether there's a good deed or a bad deed. And there is, of course, some truth to that. But at the same time, nothing can happen unless Allah permits it to happen. And whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, if the whole world comes together in order to do a good thing, but Allah doesn't want that to happen, it will never happen. And if the whole world comes together to do a bad thing, and Allah doesn't want it to happen, it won't happen. Anybody who doesn't believe this is lacking in faith. But when it actually comes to a personal level and understanding, it's difficult. But it is the highest level of faith, and it is something that we should strive for. And Mawlana is highlighting that within the Sharia, this guidance to deal with things on the individual level. So for instance, if someone steals from you, to be able to take that person to a court and try and get back what you are owed from that person. Yes, this is permitted, it's allowed. But at the same time, you should recognize that it was Allah that was behind that. And, you know, my understanding of this is that, I mean, especially if you didn't step in and, you know, do something when, you know, a crime has occurred to you, then you may very well be harming yourself and your family. So my understanding of this is you should go through the motions, but even if you're going through the motions, you shouldn't harbor any hate in your heart for that person. And you shouldn't really be seeking that you get any, that they get any severe punishment. But, you know, obviously, if you need to retrieve something from them that has been wrongfully taken, you are well within your rights to do that. But there are people who are very high-level saints who just forgive. And they're rare, but we know of them throughout history. And the reality is that however it comes to us, our risk is from Allah. Our allowance, what is granted for us in this life, our provision, it's from Allah. But of course, I mean, we still need, like for food, we still need farmers. We still need shops to be able to buy the food from. Otherwise, it will not arrive in our hands to be able to cook, prepare, and eat it. But at the same time, when we put it all together and realize that that food wouldn't be growing without the blessing of Allah, that those fields could easily be destroyed when they're planted, that even our very life is a gift from Allah, then we have to realize that everything is really from Allah, whether it is good or bad. If an earthquake happens, it is from Allah. It's part of a natural occurrence of things. But it is difficult to accept at times. And Mawlana is highlighting that because of these different levels of faith and understanding in people, that's why Islam has the Sharia on the general level for people to address these issues. But at the same time, the better way is to go deeper into their understanding of their deen and to realize that everything is from Allah. And, Mawlana uses the example of, murder, that within Islam, if someone commits murder, that if a Sharia law was in place, then they can take that person to court. Very important, it has to go to the court and be tried in a court. No one can take a life into their own hands. This is a crime in itself. Even if the person is a murderer, if you go and kill the murderer yourself, then you are just as bad as they are. It has to go through a court of law, and they have to be convicted of the crime, even in states where execution is still practiced. But execution is permitted within Islam as a sentence for a murderer, but they have to be convicted first. But it is better if a person seeks compensation rather than execution. This is straight from the Quran. And even better than that is if the person forgives them. This is the highest level of faith. And for that reason, it's of course more difficult to practice. Mawlana continues, what Allah is saying to seekers of absolute truth is, now forgive him, because I sent him to do that action. Then you realize that in reality, there is no question of guilt, nor need for revenge. But that is not the common level. That is the level to be striven for. And it is beyond us to forgive in such a manner, because our egos are like volcanoes. Now people may be very polite in their everyday dealings, as long as everyone behaves in accordance with their expectations and everything falls into place according to plan. But should, God forbid, the smallest thing go wrong, for example, a small error in driving, even one that causes no accident, for such a small reason, one may hear the ugliest obscenities pour from their mouths like a lava eruption. That ego makes people dangerously ill. And now that people are totally under their ego's command, where can you find the tolerance described in that holy verse of the Quran? It's a very good point. Today, people are under the control of their egos, which means their base nature. And for this reason, people are prone to fly off the handle and go crazy, even over the smallest things that don't fit their expectations. People expect everything to go according to how they expect. And as long as that happens, people probably will behave. But when things don't go according to plan, I mean, Mawlana is mentioning road rage, and it's well known. You don't often see someone in a situation like that who behaves very calmly and peacefully, because people generally are not at that level today. Which is actually very tragic, but it's true. So much hate and frustration is pent up in people. I see it in their looks. And so often a scapegoat is sought upon whom to release that torrent. And the best, the tried and true scapegoat throughout the world is always the foreigners. So I am quick to assure people here in the West, we are just here as your guests. This is your homeland. But is it? You can't stay here either, except in your graves. Your homeland is the grave, not above ground. Thank God, no one is begrudging us as cemetery plots. No one is trying to prevent our being buried. The grave digger wipes the dirt off his hands and goes away, and the earth accepts us indiscriminately. But people on the earth are busy making distinctions, and therefore that high level of acceptance of actions as coming from God is rarely found. But he teaches us the lesson nonetheless, saying, you must understand who I am. I am the creator of people and their works. Understand this, that you may attain peace and finally leave behind your quarrelsomeness. Once I was in Mecca with our Grand Shaykh making tawaf, circumambulating the house of Allah, the Kaaba. Grand Shaykh said to me, look up. When I looked, I saw above the heads of the people another group of worshippers performing their tawaf. But these people were of a different class, calm, peaceful, and graceful. They too were of mankind, not angels, but they were the ones who had reached the level of seeing every action as issuing from Allah Almighty. Therefore they left the level of earthly struggle. But meanwhile, back on the ground, amidst the throng with those who lack such certainty, we were being pushed, shoved, and trampled upon. Some groups locked arms and shoved straight through the crowd, full speed ahead, sending all who were unfortunate enough to fall in their path, flying through the air like discarded banana peels. Elbows in my ribs, heels on my toes. But above us, the ones who concur with God's will have no need for earth under their feet. Now perhaps you are thinking that such a thing is impossible, that I am telling a tall tale. But yet, when you are told that aeroplanes fly, you think nothing of it. For man can make metal fly, cannot God make man fly? They are at peace with their Lord and with everything in creation. Therefore, everything carries them. And so we have been shown a higher way, the vision of unity. And we have been asked to be patient with those events that are not to our liking, remembering their source. This is the best training for our egos. Undergo this training, or you will struggle fruitlessly up to the grave. We are being trained by our Lord to recognize the unity of actions, so that we can come to understand the unity of His holy names, which leads us to the knowledge of the unity of His holy attributes. That knowledge will prepare us for that ultimate dive into the unity ocean of Allah Almighty's existence. That is the final goal, that raindrop falls, and it will not emerge again ever. And it is content because it has just gained everything eternally, forever. Therefore, Allah Almighty addresses mankind saying, O man, verily, you are striving towards your Lord, and you will meet Him. He Almighty is teaching us that all our striving on earth, our running from east to west, here and there, night and day, is unwittingly nothing else than our race towards the Lord's endless unity ocean. But we can't now understand. Our souls long for our Lord, therefore we move, and there is nowhere to move, save towards the One. SubhanAllah. So Mawlana discusses here how, because people are under the control of their base nature, under the control of their ego, and people, they don't have tolerance for anything. Even small issues make them angry, make them upset. They have like a volcano inside of them that explodes at the slightest provocation. And Mawlana also highlights that wherever you are in the world, the scapegoat that is always made is the foreigner, whoever is foreign, whoever is regarded as foreign. Although even the people who are native to their homelands, their only real homeland is the grave, because they were not going to be walking above the land for very long. Maybe today, what's the average age? 70 or 80 years in the developed world. less in developing countries. That's it, you know. And if you're watching this and you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s now, doesn't leave that long left. Even for myself, it's a reminder for me. We're not on this earth for that long. And yet we quarrel. We make these problems, disputes, get involved in things which shouldn't concern us. But Mawlana is highlighting there is a better way. And that better way is to learn tolerance. A better way is to learn acceptance, which is, of course, what Islam really means, because Islam means to surrender your will to God's will. Surrender can also be, you can say, acceptance. Accept. And if you accept divine will, you accept everything. If you truly accept divine will, you accept everything, because nothing can happen except by Allah's will. That is what it means to truly be Muslim. Yet today, for most Muslims, Islam and Muslim are labels. Yes, I'm a Muslim. Alhamdulillah. I go to the mosque and pray. Then I do everything like everybody else. Muslim. Then when I'm on the motorway and someone does something wrong, I get very angry with them. Muslim. On one level, I'm not saying anybody isn't a Muslim. On one level, yes. But on the real level of embodying what it is to be Muslim, what it is as a state of being, how many people really embody that? That is rare. But that is the goal. That is what we're supposed to be doing. And you don't need to learn so many books to be able to do that. You don't need to have so many postgraduate degrees in Islam to be able to do that. No, not knocking anybody who has studied. But you don't need that in order to learn and to train yourself to truly embody that quality of Islam, that state of being of Islam that makes you truly Muslim in the truest possible and deepest possible sense. Most Muslims have some level of understanding of this, but the true depth of understanding and living Islam, to truly be accepting of the divine will at all times, every day, all moments within our life. This is rare, but we mustn't forget that's what we should be striving for. And even if we only got like 10% or 20% of that, and this become common among everybody in society, we would be living in a much more peaceful world. And we will be on the way to getting that true reality of Islam. Running from east to west, here and there, night and day, is unwittingly nothing else than our race towards our Lord's endless unity ocean. But we can't now understand. Our souls long for our Lord. Therefore we move, and there is nowhere to move save towards Allah. There's nowhere to go except towards Allah, towards the One. Oh, unless there are any questions, then I think I will leave it there. you're welcome to ask questions if you have any. Or you can submit them to me afterwards if you don't feel brave enough to post them online. That's okay. But much to think about there. If you find these videos, live broadcasts useful, if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to my Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channels. I go live on Facebook and Instagram for my weekly sohbets and zikrs on a Thursday evening, and for my Friday reflections on a Friday, usually in the evening as well. And don't forget to subscribe to my website too, at paulusarmstrong.com. I wish you all the very best. May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.